Your OCD segment is why I followed you. You
Oh,
talked
yeah?
about it recently, and I was like, oh, cool, party, let's do that. I was like, I want to hear more about it.
I do remember that clip. It was, I don't remember who it was with. Was it with a therapist?
I think it might have been.
It might have been, yeah. I've never been diagnosed with OCD. Maybe I have. I don't really remember. But it's definitely, I think, the biggest part of my mental health, for sure.
Okay. Like, I told people I was doing this, and they were like, finally. And I was like, what?
You're very passionate about it, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's a big deal. For me, I felt like I was like, oh, I have OCD. Oh, my God, what the fuck? And everyone around me is like.
It's just, I don't really like how people just throw it around like it's like some simple,
it's so invalidating.
I hate it.
Yeah. It's not an adjective. And I think that's where, if you have the awareness to understand that, it becomes your job almost to tell people, hey, what you're saying is harmful to others, right?
How does it come up for you?
Oh, I have almost every manifestation of OCD. And it's so diverse, and it has crept into every facet of my life, which is really scary.
When did it start?
I always say, like, oh, I discovered it like when my therapist told me at 27, and then I started to take inventory and look back and realize, oh, it was there too when I was 25, and it was there when I was 18, and it was there when I was 15, and if I really think about it, it was there when I was 7, and then I start to conceptualize the idea that, holy fuck, I've been suffering my whole life with this, and it has enmeshed itself into my personality, which is a horrifying thought, because it's the disorder of fear. You don't really know it's real anymore.
From the very first days, the earliest days that you can remember that you felt OCD and you were going through it, what were some of the things that you were ruminating on? Like the first signs?
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness, that was it? Okay.
And I hate saying that out loud, because that's what everyone attributes OCD to. People assume that it's, oh, I'm so OCD, I like it clean and I like it organized.
I hate that so much.
It has nothing to do with it. It's and therapists like that specialize in OCD will tell you that that is just a very small subsect of people who suffer with OCD. Yes, they like it clean, and yes, they wash their hands 10 times, and yes, they like it organized. But they're doing it for an alternative reason. The OCD is not in the fact that the house is clean or that the house is organized. The OCD is in the fact that that person probably thinks that they're going to die. And they're doing it so many times to prevent their own death every moment of every day. That is the OCD, not the actual act of being clean. It's not an adjective. You can't say, oh, well, I'm a little OCD. That's not real. It's a noun. It's a mental disorder, right?
It really is, yeah. And how old were you when you started feeling that?
I think if I could drag the memories out of my brain, the best way to describe it is like I got good validation from my ability to clean and organize things for people, and things seemed calm and okay and normal for me. Like I was like, I'm able to relax when it's clean. I'm able to be at peace when it's clean. And that was kind of like, I guess, like the slippery slope. And for me, I hate cleaning. I've gotten to the point in my life where there was moments in time where I was spending 12 hours a day cleaning.
Wow.
I've had to hire people as a form of like mental health support to take that load off. And then I've had to have moments where I have to sit in my mess, and I have to walk past things that make my skin crawl, and I have to not do certain things because I can't live like that. It was killing me, right?
And did it all lead to one road, your own death? That's why you were doing all those things? If I don't do this, if I don't wash my hands 8 times in 2 hours, if I don't do this, do that, I'm going to die? That's the thought process?
Not necessarily, and it's different for everybody. It comes from a fear of what if. I don't know what the outcome will be if I don't do this, but inherently I believe that it's bad and I need to prevent the bad. It could be anything for anybody. If I don't do this, I'll crash my car. If I don't do this, little kids are going to die. If I don't cross the road the right way, my mom's going to pass. I saw something recently where they explained that the lightest version of OCD is superstitions. People who knock on the door 3 times and that means money's coming, or step over a crack, or their mother's going to be harmed in some way. It's just once that becomes an everyday, all-consuming thing for them, that is when we definitely cross over into severe OCD territory.
And so it's very debilitating. And I think because there's a lot of things, like especially like with cleanliness and, you know, cleaning your hands, picking stuff up, or cleaning your house for 12 hours a day, like you said. Those are very external things. Did you
talk about ruminating?
Yeah, I mean, because
Okay.
there's a whole mental part of it where I think for me that's my biggest thing with OCD. It's not very external. I'm not very, you know, I am kind of a germaphobe, but it's not to the point where I'm freaking out. It's more, yeah, it's just ruminating and just my mind circling back on itself all the time.
I'm not a mental health professional, but based on how much I've had to learn about my disorder, they would categorize when it is all happening in your head that's considered pure OCD. And people will invalidate you being like, well, you're not OCD, your house is a mess. You're not OCD, you're not very organized. You're not OCD, you're not knocking at the door 10 times. No, but I do spend 99% of my day creating these systems that keep me at bay and safe in my mind, that I'm not going to crash my car. But I've seen myself crash my car in my head 70 times the entire time I was driving. I have to ask myself, did I hit a dog? Don't go back and check that you didn't hit that dog. You know what I mean? Like, that is just a small example of like the carnage that is created in ruminating. I think if that's how it is for me. For me, my OCD manifests in like mental, visual scenarios that aren't real, but they feel real and they scare me as if they're real. Like, I've had moments where I have had these images pop up in my head where the hair on the back of my neck has stood up and I've like felt nauseous from the fear that I'm exhibiting from this in the middle of my daughter's dance recital. Right? And I think the most important thing that people need to realize is that OCD is ego dystonic. It's not wanted, and it has no bearings, or it is never indicative of who that person is, how their character is, and what they believe in. And it is always unwanting, and the person is suffering from that thought. The subtypes of OCD are so multifaceted, and they encompass certain themes. And certain themes are horrifying to the point where people can't talk about the fact that they have OCD because everyone's just going to think they're fucked up or they're crazy or that they need to be in a mental institution or that they need to be in jail. But it's like, I don't want these thoughts just as much as you don't want to hear these thoughts. How does somebody remove the shame and get help for that? OCD is what imprisons you in your body, that disallows you to actually enjoy each moment that goes on.
You just mentioned, it's interesting to me, you mentioned a few times now that it's, for you, it's like more like harming people, like getting in a car accident or running over someone with a car. Is there a theme that goes on with that? Is there a connection with maybe you seeing someone getting hurt earlier on, or you've been hurt?
So people would attribute it to that. They're like, oh, well, I come from a quite traumatic background, and the contents of my OCD are so almost insane that there isn't anything that triggered it. Like,
So it could be anything. It
could be anything.
It's not
it
really,
attacks anything that really matters to me, right? And I know that certain themes that I do struggle with, a lot of them do come from certain things that I could trace back. But my fear of driving, I have a perfect driving record. I've never hit anybody. I've never been in a car with anyone being hit. Car accidents are prevalent, but for me, I think it's just the fact that it's possible allows the OCD to come in and be like, it could happen to you. You're the 1%. You will be the person that will drive off the road and kill a daycare walking by, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that it manifests, I guess the best way to explain it is like, I'll be driving and I will see kids and I will have this like almost like Instagram clip of what it looked like for me to hit all those kids. It's not that I'm afraid that I'm going to hit the kids, is that my brain showed it to me. I saw it in my head. And it was so disturbing that I had the thought of these children flying through the air and perishing at my bad decision making or my lapse of judgment or my lack of attention. That's horrifying. So it's like, those images are being pushed at me at will. It's kind of like an algorithm. Once the algorithm notices that you paid attention to that thought long enough, it goes, oh, you're interested in that? Let's show you some more. Let's make the content darker.
And then at that point, the floodgates are just wide open and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
It just spirals into this sadistic, weird place where it's like, now it's an avalanche. I can't stop it.
So that is the obsession, and the compulsion comes from, okay, well, I'm driving properly. Okay, well, I double checked. Oh, well, I have someone in the car and they know that I'm not going to hit anybody. And well, obviously I'm not drunk. I'm not under the influence. And I start reassuring myself, okay, well, I'm going to only drive in daylight. Okay, maybe I'm only going to drive when school's not in session. Maybe I'm only going to drive on the weekends because then there's no kids around. Okay, then maybe I'm not just going to drive at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I'm creating these safety parameters to prevent this image that I saw in my head that grew into this monster that's keeping me hostage. I have been locked in my house. I've been locked in my bedroom out of fear. It's been horrifying. Last year I had, I think it was 4 months of not driving my car. I couldn't. This
isn't a solution to that. I'm just going to throw it out there. Mm-hmm. Could you have thought about it this way where, take a CBT approach where if I was to hit someone, mm-hmm. I would hear about it. So a cop would come and talk to me, mm-hmm. right? Like one of my therapist talked to me about one of these, an OCD thing that I was going through. And basically he was just saying, well, okay, let's say you do that thing that you really don't want to do.
Yep.
You're going to hear about it from someone else. Someone's going to come and tell you that you did it. If it's as extreme as you say it is, mm-hmm. for example, you know, driving over a whole daycare.
Yeah.
Right? Or hitting someone on the street with a car. Like, that's not just going to get thrown under the rugs. People are going to hear about it, and you're going to be talked to by the police. You're going to get in trouble. So knowing that, mm-hmm. it's like, okay, I haven't been talked to the police. The police hasn't talked to me, or no one's told me that I've hit it. Or it's not on the news that someone's been killed in a hit and run, right? So,
but do you see how that's insidious, though?
Yeah.
Because
at this point,
you have to think those. You've created that system in your head where you're like, well, the police haven't called. It's not on the news.
But at that point, it's like, it's so suffocating. You need something to just fall back on and say, okay, I have this backing.
That's acceptance. You have to accept that maybe I did. And I have to sit in that. I have to sit in the fear. I'm exposed to the idea that maybe I did. And the anxiety and the fear that comes from that, and being exposed to that more often, being like, okay, I'm going to get in my car and I have to be okay with the fact that I might hit a bunch of fucking kids today. Fuck. You know what I mean? Like,
does that work for you or no? That acceptance piece, because at some point you gotta just accept the fact that you're thinking that way and just let it take over you and just sit in it.
There's certain things definitely where life takes precedent, right? So I have to take my kids to the doctor, and I have to drive my car sometimes, and I still have to go to the grocery store, and I still have to be a functioning person in society sometimes, and there's things I don't have a choice with. And I don't necessarily think these are even necessarily like the right coping mechanisms for somebody with OCD, but it's like I have to accept it, whether or not it happens, it's going to happen, and I have to like almost like force myself into it, and I still don't find comfort in that. Like for me, am I healed? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? I've been in therapy for many years, and the access to proper OCD treatment is so far and few between. So I have OCD themes that are way higher on the docket list than getting in my car. So I can tolerate getting in my car, and I've learned to accept sometimes you just got to sit through the horrible images, because I still get them. Mm-hmm. They're still coming. You can't make them go away. That's how your brain is formed. And there's actual science that has proven that if you take two images of somebody with a typical brain and somebody with an OCD brain, they're vastly different. You can see it. Mm. So if my brain is altered, and I guess the best way to explain it is like my brain is shaped differently. These are the parameters of my life, right? I think the healing and the therapy comes from being able to take your life back and exist outside of being under the thumb of it. If that makes sense?
I get it. No, I hear you. What are the other things that are higher up on the OCD for you, like you just said? I'm very curious, because I want to get into the things that I've kind of been through, and the things that I don't think a lot of people understand about it,
or people who are willing to even say them out loud.
Well, exactly.
See, and I always say, like, I'm never going to tell somebody that they need to come clean or be open about their, like, in terms of like with a partner or friends. The majority of people already don't understand what OCD actually is. It's a mental disorder. It is considered a disability. People are suffering from this. There's clinics and treatment centers that are treating this disorder because people are suffering so severely. There's a lot of things that aren't off the threat list in my life. Like, as a parent, my OCD probably got the worst the minute I got pregnant. And my kids' lives were always at stake, and they were constantly at threat of danger, and I was creating all of these systems to keep my kids alive that were at the cost of my own happiness and my ability to be a present parent.
You see, when you say that, every parent's going to think of that and be like, well, you're just being a great mom. That's just, you're being a great...
And then I follow it up with, do you sleep in the hallway to prevent murderers from killing your kids every night?
That's where it becomes, yeah.
You know, like it's much, much different. Am I invalidating the experience of other moms who are suffering and scared and have postpartum anxiousness and postpartum depression? Those things are very real. And there is a lot of women suffering from them. But now we're talking about when it becomes obsessive and I have to start performing compulsions to soothe myself and to be able to feel safe. I have gone to extreme lengths where I've had to go to my therapist and say, I can't be around my kids anymore. My OCD has almost convinced me that I am not a good enough person to even talk to my children, that the food I fed them was poisonous, and that the one time I took them out of the house is why my son fell down and hurt his knee, and that I was the cause of his, or even if he's throwing up, someone's going to think I poisoned him. These are thoughts that popped up in my head that made me believe that that could be possible. But that's not who I am, right? And then I have to see, look, I didn't. Like they're okay, check their blood. Just make sure, just like have evidence that like I didn't do this and everything's okay. And people are like, are you okay? And I'm like, absolutely not, right? And that is kind of when my therapist started to explain to me, you have OCD, Olivia. And I was like, no, I don't. You're lying, right? You're lying. There's no way. Like, everyone has these worries, just like you said. It could be common, but
when it gets to that, yeah,
it's a lot darker. And I heard recently someone explain it like someone's putting on a pair of headphones with the scariest metal music playing in your ears all day long, saying horrific things of various natures, of rape and death and war and genocide and suicide and flesh-eating disease and cancer, and it's all being said into your ears so loud that you can't even hear your own thoughts anymore. When you hear it for so long, you start to believe that that's who you are. Right?
Wow.
Am I a bad person because my brain keeps telling me that I could stab that guy? Am I a murderer? No. I don't feel that way. I don't want to stab that guy, but my brain keeps showing me images of me stabbing that guy. I start to lose the there becomes a disconnect with, is that who I am? Is that the kind of person I am? Can I even tell my friends that I had that thought? That's where the shame comes in, right? You start to feel this layer of shame of like, oh, I can't really, like, why would I even think that? And a lot of people believe that what they think is who they are. And it could be no farther from the truth. My thoughts don't make who I am. My thoughts don't represent who I am. And my thoughts aren't my beliefs and my ideals.
Do your kids ever reassure you that, Mom, we're okay? Or do they even know the whole scope of what's going on?
Unfortunately, my kids are very well aware of my disorder. I have had some pretty severe moments where I've had to be hospitalized. And my kids are learning to recognize that it's not that I don't trust them, it's that I don't trust myself. And I've had to have these conversations with my 9-year-old. Because as a kid, you think, oh, my mom keeps checking on me and my mom keeps worrying about me and my mom is constantly asking what I'm doing and where I'm going and who I'm with and what I'm saying and what's happening and if I'm okay. Like, the biggest one is, are you okay? Are you okay? And that was harmful to my kids, and I've had to learn how not to do that. But I do have moments where I can't help it and I can't even breathe without just like making sure, which is the compulsion, right? And my kids have recognized like, for example, recently my daughter had asked if she could go to a friend's house while I was on the phone. And I was like, sure, like, ask your dad. And I didn't pay attention to what was happening. Typically in this situation, I would have gotten all the information that I would have been able to rest easy with. Okay, where are you going? Whose house? And to me, that's normal parenting. But I get to have comfort in those details, right? And
which is fine. I mean,
which is completely fine. Any normal parent would do that. But then after I got off the phone and her dad had left, I was like, I don't have any details. She could be anywhere. She could be with anybody. And I just lost it. And it's not that that's anybody's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's not my daughter's fault. It's not her dad's fault. It's that my OCD found me by myself. And I didn't recognize that. It got me. It was a moment where I lost all my safety nets. And that is the problem, is that I'm still having to learn that I need to be okay with not knowing sometimes as a human being, right? I have to accept that the only information I have is that her dad said it was okay and he must know where she is, and we don't live in a bad neighborhood. Like, I start trying to find all of these reasonings to why it's okay. And I remember when she came home, she saw it on my face. Because I'm getting better at not externalizing these things to harm people who are unaware. And she saw it on my face and she goes, were you worried? And just the tears started coming down my face. And she goes, I'm okay. And for me, I'm just like, fuck. You know, like, this is the reality. I do have a mental disorder, and that my family members will have to understand and unfortunately accommodate in the ways that are healthy, not only for them, but healthy for me. even as a child, right?
You're so self-aware. You're so self-aware of what's going on and how you think and how you operate, right? Getting to the point of being okay with not knowing, like you said, is one of the hardest things to do. And
I think it'll take the rest of my life,
yeah,
to be honest.
It's not one of those things where you kind of just figure out and you get better at it, but it's always going to be there. And have you gone better from it? Have you been doing things to help yourself out, or is it still, because it's I'm not saying it's done, you've conquered the whole thing, but have you seen yourself get better at coping with it and dealing with it?
The awareness has taken the edge off. I'm aware what is happening now, and I'm aware that these thoughts don't define me and that they aren't a part of my personality. Now it's more so, I always say, like, it's kind of morphed. Because now it knows that it can't attack my beliefs and who I am, but it can attack the people around me, and it can attack the world around me. So it's kind of, I've gotten better, but almost worse at the same time. And unfortunately, the wait lists for support and help are so long. And a lot of therapists actually aren't certified in treating OCD properly. And they're learning that talk therapy and DBT and CBT aren't effective for people with OCD. And the proper therapy is ERP. Please don't quote me on this. Exposure response prevention, I think it is.
Oh, is it if you're scared of a spider, you keep getting closer to the spider, at some point you hold the spider type thing?
It's exactly that, yeah.
I don't know. I don't really buy that.
Really?
I don't
Why not?
I get it. I understand the
For me, I felt the same way when I heard about it too. I was like, absolutely not.
I don't know.
Okay, can I ask you what your themes of OCD would be in your opinion?
For me, it's always been very pure. It's been very mental. The earliest memory I have of OCD is, and it makes no sense.
That's okay.
It makes because here's the thing though, with you worrying about where your kids are going, whose house they're going to, and you not knowing and having that take over you, in a way that's still very rational. That is very realistic of you to be worried about that, right? Or you driving over a kid while you're out in your car. It's still, it won't happen, like, unless it actually happens. It is something that possibly could happen.
Yep.
Right? For me, it was really weird because I remember, man, the earliest I remember was when I was like 9 or 10. And I've talked about this before, but I would look at something, for example, this table with that coaster on it.
Yep.
And I would take a little screenshot of it in my head. And then for the rest of the day, I would just be ruminating about that image. It's weird. And that is something that...
What about it, though?
I don't know. And I still remember a screenshot I made in my head when I was around 9. I got out of my mom's car to go to my buddy's house, and I look to the other side of the street, and I see a green, older Volvo, and a guy opening that door, just going into his car. And throughout the whole hangout after, I was thinking about that.
In what context? Like, was it disturbing? Did it make you feel anything? It just existed there?
It just was.
Did it bother you that it existed there?
Yeah. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why I kept fixating on it. And the more I try to think, okay, like, get that out of your head, Mo. And it's such a cliche.
The more you wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah.
The more it was like,
the more it was there,
not,
like up front in my head.
Can I ask, is there worse things that have stuck there that you didn't want there?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I think that is a part of my OCD is relationships,
Yeah.
me getting over someone takes longer than the average person. So for me, seeing someone or, you know, breaking up with someone, it would take the average person half the amount of time to get over that person than it would for me. Because for me, I'm over the person, I'm emotionally over the person, but my mind would still pop.
Is it the details? Like the details of like, I'm used to this person's stuff being in this place, and I'm used to this person's smell, and I'm used to the way this person talked, and I'm used to this person's eyes. So then when you go to start a new relationship, you look at them, you're like, your eyes just, I still see their eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is a part of that. There are triggers where it does remind me, but it's just randomly, like as we're talking, the person that I was seeing just popped in my head right now. But it has there's no reason for it to pop into my head right now as we're speaking, right? Or as I'm doing whatever. It could be, it has no context to it at all. And then with that, it takes me way longer to get over someone because I could be completely happy. I could be completely in a place where I'm over this person. I have no emotional attachment to this person at all anymore. But just the mere fact of the images popping up in my head, like the image of the car, the guy opening the door.
Yeah.
It had no emotional.
It had no bearings.
It had no bearings to it. It just did. It just happened. Like I'm serious. Like I'd be looking at this thing. Look at this speaker. It's insignificant.
Can I ask what the most distressing part to it is for you?
The most distressing part is the fact that it's so insignificant and it keeps popping up, especially with this, like an object or something that's.
Oh, that would be hard because, like, for me in my mind, the way that I think about it is like, instead of fear, it's arbitrary, and you're being bombarded with all these arbitrary, useless pieces of knowledge. It's like having like. I'm throwing random items at you all day long, and you're like, but I have to focus on my life, and it's like phone, city, doorknob, like, you know what I mean? And it's like your freedom of thought is robbed from you.
Exactly. That's for me, that's where it became fearful, where I was like, uh-oh, this is something that's gonna fuck with me a lot. Like if it was something over like, oh man, like, is the earthquake that's supposed to happen gonna happen today? That's better than me fixating on a random person opening their car door. You know what I'm saying? Because
so when you say fixating, like how many times a day?
Oh man, I mean,
just a guesstimate.
All day.
Every minute of every day.
Every minute, every day. And I think, oh, another thing I remember. Oh, fuck. This really fucked with me. And I don't know if this is, I think this is OCD.
Okay.
I remember this so clearly. This is the first time that I ever started doing this. But I remember in elementary, it was grade 2 or grade 3. We were in an assembly. And I was sitting down. It was, the whole school was there in the whole gym. And someone was speaking up front. I don't know who it was. I don't remember. But randomly out of nowhere, with no context at all. Like, that's where, for me, my OCD is very random.
Yeah.
And that's where it messes with me.
Okay.
I started fixating on my blinking. Out of nowhere.
No.
I'm sitting there. My buddy's sitting here, and we're just like, oh, dude, like, I want to go home. You want to hang out later? Whatever. And then I was listening to the speaker talk. And on a flip on a dime, I started focusing on my blinking, and I'm like, oh shit, what the hell? And then I tried to keep my eyes open, but I couldn't. So I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
So
Why?
all you're thinking about is how many times am I blinking?
Yeah.
Is everyone else seeing what I'm doing?
Yeah, now my eyes are getting a little irritated. Now they're getting itchy.
Now
I'm like,
touch them.
Yes.
Because that is the compulsion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel compulsed to check.
Yeah.
I need to check. I need to make sure. Because, like, it could be anything. It could be anything. Like, you're like, do I have a piece of hair on my face?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel it, and then you stop, and then you're like, but I feel it, though. And then you have to go to the mirror and you check that there's nothing there and you're like, okay, it's not there. And then you sit back down and you feel it again. And you're like, and that's where it gets hazy for people, is that it becomes visceral. I can almost not distinguish that these things aren't real because I'm having bodily responses to it. And like for some people, they're like, well, for example, some people are afraid to eat certain foods, right? And they think that whatever they think about it, they can't eat that food for whatever reason. They don't have an allergy, but they just can't eat that food. Some people don't realize that for me, certain foods, I'm like, that'll make me sick. Why? Couldn't tell you. I have no idea. And people are like, no, but like, just try it. I'm like, I couldn't. And they're like, but why though? And I'm like, I wish I knew. I wish I could tell you. Well, just try it. Absolutely not. It'll make me sick. And then people like, just eat it. So I'll eat it. And even if it doesn't make me sick, psychosomatically, I'm making myself sick now, just at the thought of it even touching my lips, because I'm like, fuck. I put it in my mouth, right? Like, because I had set up all these safety measures in my head that just let's avoid it at all costs, because for whatever reason, somewhere in my past, some food made me feel sick, right? And I don't like the feeling of being sick. So it's like having this hyper awareness of your body. How do you invalidate your body? It's got to be right? People don't realize that your body will lie to you just because your brain is lying to you, unfortunately. Yeah. You'll have these feelings like, oh, like if I don't have a sweater, it's going to be cold outside. And it's like, see, I'm cold. And people are like, it's fucking 30 degrees outside.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, then I must be sick. And something must be wrong with me. So people are checking their blood pressure and they're going to the hospital and they're making sure like, well, my body said that these things are happening to me. So I'm trying to listen and validate my body, right? How can you not trust your own body? Right?
It's very accurate what you just said. Like the feeling of being sick, because you'll start to get a little lightheaded. It's like, oh, I knew it. I was right. Yeah, I was right. Yeah.
See, and the thing that I'm starting to learn to do is, okay, you're sick. You ate the food and you're nauseous. What are you going to do now? Because I'm not I think that's where the exposure happens. It's eating the thing and surviving the sickness, whether it comes or not. That's what happens, right? You have to sit in that feeling, like with your eyelashes, for example. You just have to, if you have an over-awareness of your eyelashes, you just have to sit in there and not check and not move and remove the idea that you're going to mentally, okay, well, my eyes are getting dry. Stop thinking about your eyes altogether. Take that, like, stop engaging with the thought process about your eyes. And you're like, but it's freaking me out. Like, no, you have to sit through it. That uncomfort right there is the thing that everyone fears.
That's
right?
the scariest part.
That's the scariest part, because for you don't feel like you'll survive it unless you give it attention, right? It'll kill me if I don't give it attention, or not even so much as that extreme. Like, you can't process anymore. Your brain is glitching, right?
Well, also the fact that I was fixating on something that's so stupid, that was also throwing me off. Like, why am I focusing on that? That, you know what I'm saying?
The why,
yeah. Because
why is
that's
happening?
It's just weird to me. It's like, dude, why am I focusing on this speaker or this coaster? Like, there's nothing to that. Like, if it did something to me, then yeah, it's a bit more justified. But the fact that I'm focusing on a guy opening his green Volvo, but what is that? Like,
for me though, it's like, no, it's not any less valid. If I sat here and yelled table at you for fucking 43 days straight, you would be in the fetal position, like, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you're suffering because you can't make it stop. People are like, just think about something else. You didn't hear me. If I could, I would. I can't. Like, there's period. Like, that's it. I can't, period. And that's the part people have a disconnect with, is that you can change your thoughts. Some people can't. Because like I said, your brain is different. How is it that we can understand that if somebody has a disability that's visual, a wheelchair or an impediment or some sort of physical ailment, that person is disabled and they require supports. But if I tell you that I need the supports for the thought process that are going on in my brain, people are going, oh my gosh, it's not that serious. You're making it up in your head. You're being dramatic.
Making up in your head. That's a big one. Yeah.
I wish I had the power to make things up in my head. Oh my gosh, my life would be so much easier. Man.
Do you feel like OCD gets into other parts of your life in the ways that if someone disrespects you, right? Naturally, for everyone, you're going to feel hurt. You're going to feel hurt and disrespected and upset. But for an average person, it could take maybe a day, 2, a week. But for you or for me, it would take 3 months. Do you see OCD trickling down into other parts of your life like that, where it's grabbing onto something and not letting go of it? Yeah. Like I said, like for me, like breaking up with someone or ending a relationship. And it could be a very insignificant, not that serious thing, but I hold on to it not because I want to, it's because like the image of the coaster or the guy popping up in my head, opening his car, it pops in my head like that.
So in a relationship, what example would you give me?
I mean, so for example, like the last person I was seeing, we ended it. I've started my healing process a long time ago. I'm over it, but a part of me is still not completely over it because of the random times it pops up into my head of just her face or a time we had together or an experience of us going out somewhere.
Is it disturbing to you? Like after a certain amount of time,
it is, yeah.
You feel like, okay, I'm done this shouldn't be happening anymore.
Yeah, especially when people around me tell me, dude, it was only a couple months. Like, why are you so stuck on this person that meant you didn't really even know her like that? And it's true.
I think that's where the harm comes in almost, is because people are trying to rationalize something that's not rational.
I don't want to invalidate myself, but in a way, like with that particular example of me getting over this person, it helps me understand why I'm still not completely over this person. It soothes me because I can just chalk it up to, oh, it's my OCD. Does that make sense?
A little bit. For me, it's like
for example, if someone said to you, oh, you suck at this. Yeah. You're not a very good whatever.
Yeah.
Does it stick with you longer than it should?
Okay, here's a perfect example. Here's a perfect example. You and I talked like a week ago, right? The first thing that I did after you and I had like set the date and like established what our plan was, I Googled what OCD was. Because in my brain, I have these intrusive thoughts that invalidate me and my suffering. You're not really suffering. You don't even have OCD. What is OCD? You don't know what you're talking about. That is the ruminating that happens in my head. But I do, right? That is so vastly different than reality. For you, you know the relationship is over and you know that it's over, but your mind is telling you, but you're still thinking about her. Right? And if you explain it to your friends, like, oh man, this girl popped up in my head again, they're like, come on, like, get over it. And you're just like, I am, but it keeps popping up in my head. That's where you start to have to realize that you and your friends are having a very different conversation. They think they're giving you relationship advice, but you are actually talking about something you're struggling with in your mental health life. Two different conversations.
Because it's past the point of me not being over her. I am.
Yeah.
But it's just...
But people have a hard time distinguishing that just because the content is of somebody else doesn't mean that it's not a different problem we're facing, right? Nobody wants to be experiencing their wedding day and have their ex-boyfriend pop up in their head. Does that mean that they don't love their husband? or their future husband. No. It was a thought. It was an intrusive thought. That's why it's so important to use the correct verbiage to these things, that this is an intrusive thought. I didn't want this. It is, again, it's ego dystonic. It has nothing to do with how you feel and what you're thinking and what you believe in and who you are deep down. You can think about your ex-girlfriend 30 times a day, but it doesn't mean you love her. It doesn't mean that maybe she was the one, because people start to be like, oh, well, maybe that must mean I'm still in love with her. Like, maybe I should still call her.
Right, and then you get into this pigeonhole of like, fuck, did I fuck it up? Am I still in love with her? Was she the one? Did I mess it up? Yeah.
Boom, OCD. Right? It's sick.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that. And that's the thing. And that's why this is so important to have these kind of conversations, is that people don't understand what it is. So they don't know that they might be suffering with it. Right?
Because someone might be thinking that, like, damn, I keep thinking about my ex. Maybe I still do love her. Maybe I should call her. But no, it's not that. It's just that you have intrusive OCD thoughts right now.
Can you imagine how many people actually act on the things that their intrusive thoughts have convinced them that they're wrong about? How many people are re-engaging in relationships that they really weren't into,
right,
but their OCD convinced them that maybe you do love them. Maybe that was the one that got away. Maybe you need to fight for them harder. Maybe them cheating wasn't really that big of a deal. Maybe, do you want to die alone? Like, you know what I mean? It does have this spiral effect. And a lot of times people are so consumed with the thoughts that they're like, but I don't really like them. And that's okay, right? For me, I have to think, if it's not happening and it's not here and it's not in my present moment, this is exactly how it should be. And the factory that's moving around in my head doesn't get to have a say-so on how I move forward.
For you, when you're experiencing OCD and you're in the midst of it, of course it leads to anxiety. And then the anxiety promotes the OCD, and the OCD promotes the anxiety, and then it's just a back and forth.
Dumpster fire.
Yeah. For me, and a lot of people, man, I would say a lot of people, I'm not going to say lucky. No, that's not the word. For me, I get anxious, but I never fall into depression. I'm just anxious all around. Okay. So I'm just anxious, OCD. Anxious. Yeah. OCD, oh shit, anxiety, but never fall into depression.
Don't you think that would almost be considered depression? If you're always in a constant state of semi-suffering, how could that not have a depressing, long-lasting effect on you later down the road? Sort of almost suffering isn't living, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it.
For me, though, you know what's crazy for me? I had a depressive episode a few months ago, and I remember thinking in the middle of it, this is kind of peaceful. From being away from the anxiety.
Okay,
seriously.
Cool.
I knew I was going through it. I knew that these were symptoms of depression, but it was almost that heightened state of just, oh my God, something's happening. Oh my God, I need to do something, was gone. And it was kind of a relief. It really was.
It's kind of like anxious burnout.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like a depression. It's that I just gave up. My anxiety won. I just let it take my life over. Fuck it, right? Like I'm not calling anybody. I'm not going anywhere. I might not brush my teeth today. I forgot to brush my teeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to be okay with that, right?
Yeah, you just don't give a fuck anymore. Right. And people are like, come on, man. Like, what brings you nothing brings me happiness. I bring nothing. I just want nothingness. You start seeking that nothingness. And people are like, you're depressed. I'm like, actually, I'm getting a break because I'm burned out from my brain running on 10,000 every day. And people don't even understand that. And I think that's what drives me crazy a lot of the times is people look at me and they're like, but you're normal and you post on Instagram and you have all these kids and you manage and you do these things. I am holding on by a thread, and I have a support system that holds me together with duct tape and prayer. Right? I suffer severely. really bad every day in so many ways that's unfathomable to a lot of people. And my family is always on guard to make sure that there's safety nets around my children and around myself, to make sure, because I always say, like, oh, I said this last night. I saw Howie Mandel, famously OCD, right? And he was like, I'm 1 second away from losing my fucking mind and going crazy and just giving up. And I was like, that's exactly what it is. I'm no different than the crazy guy who's in the nut house right now. I'm not. I'm no different than that. I just have to work very hard to hold it together, like with my whole being, because it would almost be easier to do that. This is the hard thing. But I have a mission, and I have a purpose, and I have responsibilities that matter to me, right? And that is my why. That's more important than all the other whys that my OCD is asking me. You have to decide what's important. You wake up every day and you decide you're going to do this. This matters to you, so much so that it beats your OCD, right? A lot of people can't even get past that. The fact that, like, am I good enough? Am I, like, think about it, like, body dysmorphia is kind of like a sense of OCD, right? My brain is telling me that I'm not tall enough, or that I'm overweight, or that my skin isn't nice, or that everyone sees me as ugly, or that, you know, like all of the things that people obsess about. And you're like, no, you look great, and, you know, heights are for everybody, right? But you know that deep down that's not going to change anything for that person. That is something that they're suffering with. And then people like to trivialize it by, oh, they're just insecure. Why are we so okay with invalidating people's suffering?
Why does it have to be, oh, he's insecure, or, oh, you're still not over her, or, oh, you're just a really clean freak? You like, it's like, no, man. Yeah. I mean, just me, like, I don't know, man, like me giving an example of looking at this coaster and it just popping in my head, like, what? There's no rhyme or reason to that. You can't justify that.
It doesn't matter if you can justify it. If you're saying you're in pain, I believe you. And that's how fucking simple it is. If I tell you I'm in pain, are you going to believe me? And if I tell you that my thoughts are causing me pain and I can't change it, are you still going to believe me? Because I'm telling you I don't want this, and I'm telling you that this hurts me and makes me uncomfortable and makes me afraid. Are you going to trivialize me by saying, well, think of something else, or it's going to be okay? How about you help me find a doctor? How about you help me find a therapist? How about you, as my friend or my partner or my cousin or my mother or my dad, look up what I'm suffering with and recognize that this is a very real thing. And whatever it is, I don't actually, like when you say, like, oh, it's random images that aren't that bad, but it's bad to you. You don't like it. It hurts you. And you can't make it stop. Someone could be listening to elevator music all day long. And what do people famously say? Elevator music is the music they play in hell, right? If I have to listen to that all day, I am living in hell. Nobody deserves that.
As you're talking about it, wouldn't full acceptance of everything be
that is the cure?
That is the ultimate, hey?
I always say it's kind of like an evolving Pokemon almost. Like, once you've accepted something, it morphs into something that makes it harder for you to accept it.
I mean, at the end of it all, it's just death. I mean, if you can accept
you know
death,
what? I'm gonna take it there, because I've been like kind of like, death is not even just like the worst thing that somebody with OCD could be afraid of. There's a few themes of OCD that I personally struggle with, and I know other people struggle with, that how the fuck do you accept that? When we have this world where everyone talks about everything and everyone is broadcasting so much information all at once, it's not hard to accidentally stumble upon the reality that this is real, this could happen, that could happen, you could be on vacation and that could happen. those are one-offs, one in a millions, right? And it's easier to accept that, yeah, I'm probably not going to hit the kids in the car. But how common is it that somebody's uncle is molesting them? How do you accept that? That your uncle's not molesting your daughter. Your brother's not molesting your daughter. Your friends aren't molesting your daughter. When the statistics prove the opposite. I can't go to the internet to validate that it's not realistic. I can't go to people and say, well, that's not likely when the information out there says the opposite.
These are real things happening.
These are real things
Whether
happening.
you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. Or I'll take you one step further. What if my thoughts start showing me images of me being a child molester? Then what do? Can you accept that? Because pedophilia OCD is a very real thing that a lot of people are suffering with. That they'll have images, or even bestiality OCD is also a common theme. It's of the top ones, right? An image of yourself having sex with your dog or your cat. That would fuck you up, right? And you're like, well, obviously I'm not that kind of person. But if you keep seeing it enough, that's going to fuck with your head. And you're like, something is wrong with me. So then you got to get rid of your pets. And then you got to stay away from children. Because how do you accept that that's not who you are when that's all that's playing in your head and your brain goes, oh, I got a visceral reaction from you when I showed you that image. Let's show it to you again. Let's show it to you again and again and again and again. And you're going to start thinking, I'm just not going to think that. I'm not going to think that. What happens when you're not going to think that 24/7? You're not able to think about anything else because you're not going to think that. Right? So it's like there's certain things you can't accept. It becomes very tricky when people start to realize OCD has no boundaries. It'll attack you where you are most vulnerable and what you care about the most. I said this to a girlfriend earlier. I said, what if a lot of the women or even men who would love to have children are suffering with this version of OCD? How can they trust themselves when they're changing their baby's diapers? If they're seeing images or thoughts that are telling them that they might be a child molester. But that's not who I am. I don't want to do that. So then to make sure, you're not going to change your baby's diapers. You're not going to even touch your daughter anymore. You're not going to change her anymore. You're not going to let anyone change her anymore. You're going to have to somehow teach her to change herself, because if you're in the same room with her, you're breaking her privacy. And that's something that a pedophile would do. Right? How do you accept that?
Oh,
it's
man.
horrifying,
I don't know.
right?
No, yeah, I don't know.
It gets crazy because
you're right. It has no boundaries. Like, people think that's insane for someone to think that way, but it can take you to the deep end.
That's more
like
common than cleanliness OCD.
Really?
Cleanliness, I think the statistic at the moment is 30% of people suffer with the cleanliness OCD. Self-harm is up there. Self-harm OCD, intrusive thoughts about self-harm. Homicidal OCD is up there. There's a bunch. Terminal illness, hypochondria, right? People believe that they're sick. I would much prefer to just be clean. I would much prefer to just be organized. I also have that. I have so much more. I was asked about a year ago to be a part of a test group for an OCD treatment facility. And when I got the call, they told me it was going to be a 2-hour interview process. And I was like, okay, cool. And I'm like, okay, what is this going to entail? Is it a test? Is it an aptitude test? Are they going to, how am I going to make it? Am I going to pass? Is that going to invalidate my OCD? And when it started, he explained to me that we can only take people who have moderate OCD presentation. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And he goes, well, we can't facilitate people with severe OCD or mild OCD. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, let's do it. So I did the interview and answered the questions. It was like 2 hours worth of questions. And about halfway through, I knew I had failed. I knew that I was not going to be accepted in the group. Because the more questions he asked, I started to realize, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I have way more going on than I can actually conceptualize in one day. And when it's asked to me in a direct sense, I check off all the boxes. That's why these forms are being given. Like, what do you have? And then you have to read them to check what you have. And then when you start checking, all of a sudden you realize, oh shit, I've checked off 80 out of 100. And I had never felt so much sympathy in that moment, because he goes, I am so sorry that I can't bring you into this group. And I was like, what am I supposed to do now? And he was like, you do require more specialized care, because you're going to see, you have certain OCD triggers that are going to take a longer time to unravel and work through and gain acceptance, because they're so enmeshed into everyday life, like an example of these more severe themes, right? It doesn't just take an acceptance, it requires undoing, and it requires repurposing and realigning those neural pathways to healthier behaviors. And that could take a long time. He said with moderate cases of OCD, people are going to get progress in a short amount of time, because that's what the program is set up for. They would like people to be at least able to experience progress in that 6-minute time span that they can afford. And he goes, it could be triggering to you to not see any progress while other people are experiencing it. And I was like, gutted, right? He was like, you do have quite a severe form. It has enmeshed itself into my personality. So it's like, when people want to have this conversation about acceptance and changing your thought process, and just get over it. That's a really big spit in the face. You know?
100%. I hear you.
Because if I told you, hey Mo, just think about something else, you'd be like, fuck you, right?
Even though I know, you know, you're trying to be helpful and you're trying to look out for me. Like my friends, when they tell me, dude, just, I know they come from a good place, but they just don't get it. You just don't get it unless you're going through it.
And that's the thing. And it's sad, because some people don't even know they're going through it yet. And some people don't have the dots to connect that this is the problem. Because we are in a society where everyone is self-diagnosing, and people are like, oh, everyone's autistic and everyone has ADHD and everyone's got a label on it. What is wrong with people wanting to find help to their inner suffering? What's wrong with that? These people are suffering and they want a solution. And we don't have the infrastructure to be able to accommodate everybody. If people can barely get in to get assessments and scans and ultrasounds, how the hell am I supposed to get a diagnosis to know what's actually going on with me? Or should I just be tougher and work out more? Right?
As we've been talking about it right now, have you had OCD thoughts?
The entire time.
About what?
I'm hyper aware of even how I sit and how I talk, and I'm probably going to go home and imagine that everything I've said today was bullshit and didn't matter.
What if I told you that's incorrect and everything you said was of high value and you spoke very well and you sat perfectly fine? That wouldn't do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I mean that genuinely.
I would be appreciative deep down in my heart
I already know the answer.
It wouldn't remove the feeling. Does that make sense? I would be so appreciative of you and know that I did something right today. It wouldn't remove the sadness that's overcome me with inadequacy. Because I have this OCD elephant in the room that reminds me that I ain't shit, that nothing that comes out of my mouth is intelligent, and then nobody gives a fuck what I have to say. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I think that's why it's so cool that you're doing something like this, because I had the worst episode last night in preparation for this.
Really? Mm-hmm. Were you nervous?
No. I'm not really a nervous person. That's
interesting you're not.
No.
OCD.
I've done crazy shit in my life. Like, and people are like, oh, she's afraid of everything. Yeah, but somehow I've done so much. I've lived an insane life, and I have done things that people are like, that bitch is crazy, right? Like, because I think it's like running to the danger is the only way to actually feel like you're living. And I find that the OCD only finds me when I'm at home, if that makes sense. Like, it only really, like, it's like an abusive boyfriend waiting for me at home, being like as soon, like, I can come here and do all the things that I can, and I can go to birthday parties, and I can go to concerts, and I can go see my friends, and I can fly across the country, and all of these things. I can still do all of those things. I might have a hard time leading up to them, but as soon as I get home, it's like regular scheduled programming again. Like, I still have a lot of work to do, and there's certain things that I have to work on every day. Like, I am home all day, every day. I can't work because of my disability. It's become that crippling for me. And people are like, well, what do you mean? You seem fine. There are certain things that make it... I definitely have moments where it has consumed me, and I believe everything that's going on in my head.
In this particular example of you leaving here and thinking about the fact that you didn't say anything of value, and you didn't sit the way you wanted to, or you didn't speak very clearly, that's all very common and natural to think about that. Oh, damn, I didn't do well. How far does it go for you?
I probably won't watch this. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't want to feed my OCD any content to berate me with.
I get that.
You know?
Yeah,
I hear you.
I
don't want to give it ammunition. I don't want to allow an intrusive thought to morph from something that I did that I believed was important. I saw 2 years ago, there was a content creator on TikTok who was openly talking about these things for the first time that I've ever seen in my entire life. She has an OCD treatment facility in New York City, and her presentation and theme of OCD is quite hard to talk about for a lot of people. And the fact that she was so openly talking about it and then talking about all the other types of OCD, I was like, wait, I'm not fucked up. It's not just me. I remember I cried watching her stuff. I did, because I was like, holy fuck, I thought I was fucked. I thought I needed to be in a mental institution for years. I've done everything. I've tried every modality of therapy that I could afford. I've done hero doses of mushrooms to try and make the demons go away. I've gone to church and all the things to, like...
I think that's the unique thing about OCD as well, is that there's so much variability between everyone that you think you're the only one going through those things. Whereas like something like depression, anxiety, there's a set of symptoms that are kind of consistent throughout everyone, but with OCD it could be pretty much anything, where it gets to the point where you're thinking, okay, well, it's something wrong with me. Like me thinking about the coaster, the guy opening his door. In my head, I said, surely there's no one else thinking this way. There's no one else taking little screenshots of random things throughout the day and keeping them in their head. But that's just OCD. That's the scary thing about OCD. It has no rhyme or reason. It could be anything. It has no boundaries, like you said.
And therein lies the complex way of having to fix that. And unfortunately, there is no cure to OCD. It will be something you live with every day. And it is something that you have to liken to a recovery. It's not healed. I need to be in recovery from my OCD for me to be at peace. And I will always have the threat of relapsing or having episodes that I couldn't control. This is the reality for me. I don't have schizophrenia, and I could be misinformed, so don't quote me on this, but I've always explained to people, I said, OCD is like schizophrenia, except with schizophrenia, you hear these very imaginative scenarios of people seeing pink clouds and marching bands walking down the street and superheroes showing up and God coming and talking to them, and forms of like similar to psychosis, right? I said OCD is like that, except the content matter is always real things. Real things happening. And people are like, well, it can't be that bad. There's bad things that happen in this world. There's accidents that happen to people. There's tragic ways that people die.
There's diseases you can get.
There's diseases you can get that you could be suffering from. And is the mole on my back cancer? And have I tried to cut it off? Yeah, I have. To get it away from me, because I can't fix it right now, because I can't get into a doctor because it's 12 at night. And if I can't leave my kids behind because I'm going to die of cancer soon, and I need to start prepping my will. And it becomes this, like, I'm trying to appease it constantly. I need to get a blood test. Oh my gosh. You won't believe how many times I was going to the hospital as a younger person. Like that for me, I'm in recovery kind of from that. Like my health OCD has gotten dramatically better with the awareness of my OCD, because I kind of have accepted my mortality, and that it's okay. I could die any day. That was really important for me to understand, because I was becoming a regular at the hospital. Just check. Just tell me I'm not dying, and they don't do that. They don't tell you you're not dying. They just leave you in the chair for 14 hours. And you have to assume that if they're not rushing in an EMT cart to come bring you back to life, that you probably aren't dying.
Right. And you know what's so crazy about that is that someone listening to that, a viewer listening to what you just said, they would probably think, well, fuck, just like, don't you get exhausted? Don't you get tired of just going there for 14 hours, going to the hospital every day? But it's really not like that. Like, it takes over you to the point where exhaustion and just accepting defeat isn't an option.
Yeah.
Like people think, well, just let go. Like, just let go. It's just tell yourself, it's fine. Just let go of the idea of dying, and just, I don't know, it works in weird ways, man. It really does.
See, I've had to like develop an almost like delusional sense of like security when it comes to health issues, because it's like, okay, well, I guess that's just a part of the plot. If I get this type of cancer, if I have this rare blood disease, or if I have this autoimmune disease, I've paid a gross amount of money towards health products and health. And I had a really bad problem with reading medical studies when it came to like medications and stuff. I would read them in detail, and because usually in the beginning of a study, you'll see that they describe the test subjects and how they are similar or how they're different, and how the results will differ based on how their socioeconomical standing, and like what they eat in a day, what their diet is, and they give the factors to decide the information output to what they're testing, right? Hours. I could not take a medication without knowing what it did to other people. That was a hard time. That was a really hard time. And I think that was like the dark end of Googling my symptoms. People are like, don't Google your symptoms. I'm like, Google my symptoms. I know what surgeries cure that disease. I know what like specialists in the United States are able to help me. I've already looked up their phone numbers. I've sent them emails, right? Like asking like, well, if I flew there, could you help me out? Like, I'm never going to fly there. I haven't even been diagnosed yet.
Right.
But it consumed me. I couldn't even sleep because it doesn't want you to sleep. It wants you to think about it. So yeah, it is exhausting. It's so exhausting. And that's why people experience burnout from it, right? You can only tolerate
Or you might not
that.
get burnout. That's
You
the
might
thing with
not.
OCD. It keeps you, it does just enough to keep you going, but not fully just shut you down.
For some. I do know people who are suffering to the point where I had to decide if I wanted to mention that person out loud, if they'd be comfortable with that. I know some people who will never be in a state of happiness, who will never experience happiness because of their OCD, ever, until they die. And they've had to accept that that's just what they're okay with. And you look at it and you still know that that's suffering, and they know that that's suffering. But what can anyone do? You know, like when it's gone too far, and that is what that person needs to be sane and needs to get by. You know, like that's a prison. That person's in a prison. And they know they're in a prison, and they feel like they're in a prison. Is it just something they need to get over? You know?
Yeah. To end this all, what's one thing, I mean, there's so many things you could say, but what's one thing you would tell someone that's suffering right now? Or don't know they're suffering from OCD? Because I think we made it clear that some people don't even know.
Yeah. I see you. I think that's so important for people to just actually be like, you know what? I'm going to shut the fuck up and I'm going to listen to how that those people are suffering. The craziest part to me is in my suffering, I've not been able to like keep it in. It's broken out and it's exposed me and it's made me vulnerable, and I've accepted the vulnerability because I'm used to shame. Like I have no it is what it is, you know? And in that I've started almost vomiting my thoughts and my feelings and what's important to me, and I've started receiving people who are like, I didn't know I had this until you mentioned it. And I was like, what do you mean? And I get into I've met a few people over the last couple of years who have in secrecy have come to me and said, hey, I've not told anybody that I'm having these thoughts. And I can almost read between the lines where they're editing themselves, because the fear of the actual content the OCD is giving them is so strong that they're almost minimizing themselves in their confessions. To be like, hey, I'm also suffering too. I'm suffering in this way and it's consuming me and nobody knows. You would never know. There are some people out here that are friends with everybody who have contacted me and said, I want to die every day. I'm barely holding on. The only people who know I'm suffering like this are my family members. And it's like, holy fuck. We live in that kind of society where people can't be open and honest and say, hey, I'm hurting and I need support and I need kindness and I need understanding. I think that's why a lot of the times I will start the conversation with, I suffer from OCD. That's what it is. People are like, well, why is that important? Why is the wheelchair important? To me, there's no difference. There is no difference. He needs a ramp and I need this conversation.
I appreciate you coming on. This is top 5, I think. Yeah, I'm very grateful that you came by.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
It means a lot, and I'm probably going to go sit in my car and cry because, just how it works with me sometimes. But this is so important, and this could save people's lives. It really could. The suicide rate for people with OCD is, I think it's twice as likely than the average person. So if what you believe and what I believe and other people are suffering with is talked about more, it'll stop being an adjective and be respected as the disorder that it is. And that's when the change will happen. And that's when the supports will grow.
I really do hope you listen to this. I know you're...
I'll probably have to listen to it on headphones and not look at it. And it, I don't know. I'm working on it. I am. I really am. And I think this is valid, validation of that I've gotten this far. Oh, I could have never done this 5 years ago.
That in itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll call it there.